Hey guys, it's me, English teacher Matthew, and I'm back with another video. And in today's video, I'm going to teach you some phrases you can use when making a presentation in English. So let's start by talking about the introduction. The introduction is the first part of the presentation, and you will say it at the beginning. This will include an introduction of yourself as well as an introduction to the presentation itself as well. So our introduction will be made up of three parts. The first part will be an introduction of ourselves, and then an introduction to our presentation, and finally about taking questions. So in the first part of the presentation, you can say, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name's and thank you very much for coming today. Good afternoon, my name's Matthew. Thank you very much for coming today. And in the second part, you can say, in today's presentation, I'd like to show you, or in today's presentation, I'd like to explain to you. So for example, in today's presentation, I'd like to show you how to make a presentation in English. In the third part, you can say, if you have any questions you'd like to ask, then please wait till the end when I'd be glad to answer them. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, then please wait until the end and I'd be glad to answer them. Now we're in the middle of the presentation, the main part of your presentation, when you'll be delivering the information to the audience, to the listeners. Now, during this part, it really depends on what you're talking about, but there are some markers we can use to help us to go between different sections. So, for example, you can start by saying, to begin with, let's talk about the introduction. Now let's move on to. Now let's move on to the main part of the presentation. So I'd just like to conclude by. So let's move on and talk about the conclusion, the end of your presentation. So you can say it in a very easy way, just like this. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, then I'd be glad to answer them. Now that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Now, after the presentation, some people may ask you some questions, and you may need to refer to something you said before. So there are a couple of phrases I would use. So, for example, I would say something like, as I mentioned earlier, the sales are increasing. As I said before, profit is rising. As I said before, profit is rising. And sometimes they may even ask you a difficult question. And if they ask you a difficult question, you can say, I'm not so sure about that. Maybe I can get back to you. I'm not so sure about that. Maybe I can get back to you. So that concludes today's video lesson. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, then please leave them in the comments below, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. If you do want to see more, don't forget to subscribe, and if you did like today's video, press the like button. I really hope that you learned something new today, and until next time, keep practicing.